How do you feel about being vulnerable? Do you feel like it shows weakness? Does the thought of it make you uncomfortable? Or maybe you just don't know how to be vulnerable in a way that's still professional. Well, today we are breaking it all down and figuring it out. Let's dive in. Hey, leader, welcome to the Culture Keepers podcast. I'm Kara List, your leadership coach, and here we dive into topics that empower you to embrace your most important role as a leader, a culture keeper. And together we'll explore how to put your people and mission first while cultivating a happy, healthy workplace. I'm so excited about this episode and honestly, this whole series. Over the next few episodes, we're going to unpack some of the key characteristics that make a leader strong, connected, and effective. The kind of leader you are and want to keep becoming. And today we're going to kick it off with one that's often misunderstood: vulnerability. Now, if that word just makes you shiver, I get it. Vulnerability is not a comfortable thing to talk about, right? We know we should be open with our teams, but most of the time we have no idea when or how to actually do it. So we're diving into what vulnerability really means in leadership, how to embrace it, move past the awkwardness, and make it work for you. And stick around till the end for some bonus tips you can use this week to lead with more authenticity. Okay, let me take you back to 27-year-old Kara, who was thrown into a leadership role with all kinds of ideas and energy, but not a clue about how to manage a team. All I knew was I had a lot to prove. Back then, I thought any sign of weakness could give people a reason to doubt me, especially the ones who weren't exactly rooting for me. Does that sound familiar? I felt like I had to have all the answers, and I thought if I didn't, my team would lose confidence in me. And looking back now, I realize that was driven by insecurity. And honestly, that's pretty normal when you're stepping into leadership. Here's the thing: I wasn't perfect, but I was doing everything I could to make it look like I had it all together. And what I didn't realize at the time is that people don't connect with perfection because it's not real. My team wasn't fooled. Your team isn't fooled. Authenticity, my friends, that's the real magic ingredient. So Brené Brown says that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Think about that. If we want our teams to take risks, share their ideas, and bring their full selves to work, we have to model that first. Vulnerability creates safety. And when people feel safe, they'll step up, they'll speak out, they'll contribute at a higher level. And you want that, don't you? So it all starts with you. It all starts with me. So how do we actually do this? How do we as leaders start leading with vulnerability? Okay, we're going to break it down into 4 key actions. The first is admit mistakes. Own them. When you mess up, just own it. No shame in that. It's way more powerful to say, hey, I got that wrong. Here's what I'm learning from it, than to pretend it didn't happen or try to hide it. And don't miss this: when you take ownership, you're in control of fixing it. And I really get it. This is hard. It's hard on our pride. And sometimes we aren't even directly responsible for the mistake. But as the leader, the buck stops with you. Admitting to mistakes means you won't have to keep up a perfect facade, and your team will respect you so much more for it. And even they'll feel the freedom to admit mistakes themselves without shame or fear. The second way to lead with vulnerability is to ask for help and input. Are you feeling the pressure to make all the decisions or have all the answers? I remember when I stepped into leadership, I was so afraid of staff meetings. I remember thinking, what if they ask me something I don't know? I was seriously afraid of it. But friend, it is a bad idea to think you need to have all the answers and to keep the discerning and the deciding to yourself. If you do, your team will stop speaking up. They will assume you've got it all figured out, and then you'll be stuck making every decision. Yikes. Instead, try something like, I'd love your perspective on this, or this is where I'm at. Will you help me figure this out? Just ask for help. Invite people in. The third way to lead with vulnerability is to share personal stories. And vulnerability doesn't mean spilling every detail of your life. Trust me, save the Netflix binge recaps for a girls' night, right? There's most definitely a need to be personally cautious while being professionally vulnerable. So don't tell them something they definitely didn't need to know. Tell them something that might interest them or help build a connection. It is really just letting your team see the real you. Share a struggle you faced or a lesson you learned the hard way. I mean, share something completely boring about your life. It shows that you're human and opens up space for your people to be real with you too. And this just takes time. It takes consistency. And a great place to start, the first 10 minutes of your team meeting. Grab this free guide that gives you the template to start every staff meeting with connection and vulnerability. This template will massively improve the impact of your meetings. Go ahead and get it at heycarolist.com/kickoff or go ahead and grab it in the show notes. The last way to lead with vulnerability is to create a culture of psychological safety. It sounds like a big task, I know, but let's take it one step at a time. This one's not just about you being vulnerable. It's about creating an environment where your team feels safe enough to be real, take risks, and even mess up without feeling like they'll be punished. When they bring an idea or feedback to you, how do you respond? You want to encourage their ideas, even if they're a little out there. You want to respond with curiosity, like, that's an interesting approach. Let's explore this more. What are your thoughts on how we can make it work? That creates an atmosphere where they feel safe to bring themselves to the table. I've been under leaders who responded to almost all of my ideas with a reason why it wouldn't work or why they had considered that before but decided against it. And after that happens a couple times, you just stop offering your thoughts and ideas. What's the point? You don't have to say yes to every idea. Sometimes we think we have to say yes, but you actually should absolutely not do that. You can receive every idea with curiosity and work through it as a team. This creates safety for your team. Now, if all this vulnerability stuff feels risky to you, I get it, but I want to share some of the most common fears and just how to push through them. The first is, I'll look incompetent. Nope. Vulnerability doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It actually shows confidence and courage because only secure leaders are open enough to admit when they don't have all the answers. It builds trust, and that's way more powerful than pretending to be perfect. The second fear is, I'll lose authority. And actually, it's the opposite. People don't follow titles. They don't follow titles, they follow trust. And trust is built when you're real and honest. If you want your team to stick with you through the highs and the lows, show up authentically. You will earn their respect, but not because of your title, but because they know you're for them. The third fear is, I don't want to be too emotional. That makes sense. But vulnerability isn't about oversharing or turning your team meeting into therapy. Please do not do that. It's just about being real. You can share your humanity without making it awkward. It's about creating space for your team to feel comfortable being themselves. I think a good rule of thumb is to share your scars, not your wounds, right? If you're still in the middle of a messy situation, that's not the time to dump it on your team. Once you've processed it, that's when you can share lessons learned. And just to finish this off with some real-world inspiration, you might have heard of Arianna Huffington. Arianna Huffington's journey is a great example. Back in 2007, she was at the top of her game with the Huffington Post. But it came at a cost to her health. After literally passing out from exhaustion, she realized that pushing herself to the limit wasn't sustainable. So she owned up to her burnout, began a journey to get well, and then publicly shared her story. This wasn't about weakness. It was a moment of strength, actually. She used that vulnerability to create a culture of openness and self-care at the Huffington Post. She shifted the conversation around work-life balance, and by being vulnerable, she actually became a more powerful leader. All right, what now? Here's how you can start leading with vulnerability this week. These are my bonus tips for you. I want you to reflect on the last time you showed vulnerability. When was it? What did it look like? If it's been a while since you were intentionally vulnerable, challenge yourself to find an opportunity for it this week, and do it by sharing a personal story with your team. Something real, not too heavy, but that shows you're human. And start small. Think about owning a mistake, asking for input, or acknowledging an idea that someone else shares. Vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools you can use as a leader, and friend, it will truly set you apart. Okay, next time we'll dive into another key leadership quality, empathy. This one's huge, and you might be surprised when we talk about what empathy actually is and what it isn't. If this episode is helpful, I'd love for you to leave a rating or review and for you to share your thoughts. Don't forget to grab that free meeting kickoff guide to make vulnerability part of your team meetings this week. Friends, this was fun. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, I'm cheering you on.